All right, we are live. For folks that are here right on time, we're going to start in just 90 seconds or so. Give folks a chance to trickle in. Nicci and Leno, you want to share your location real quick?
Yes, I am in the bush in South Africa in a beautiful, chilly night.
I'm in Johannesburg, big city in South Africa. Also a beautiful, chilly evening. We're just entering winter here, and our houses are not equipped for winter.
How far apart are you guys, roughly?
Like 6-hour drive or 7?
5.5. No, 5.5.
You're faster than me, Nicci.
I'm faster than you, yeah. about 600 kilometers.
Got it. Cool. All right. Just 30 more seconds, folks, and we'll get started. And thank you both for joining, given how late it is for you.
That's a pleasure. Anything for pangolins, James.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme of the week.
Yeah.
Or anything for pangolins. You got some fans already in the chat.
Yeah.
Yay! Hi, everyone.
Hi, Demi.
All right, we'll get started. So, hey, everybody, this is the second session on day 5, our 6th session overall. Excited to be joined by Leno and Nicci. In this session, we're going to be kind of talking about the whole process of rescuing a pangolin through rehabilitation and repopulation. They've assembled some amazing photos, kind of a photo diary that they're going to talk us through. I've been lucky enough to have a preview of it, and some of the pictures are incredible. And so this is definitely one of those sessions you're probably going to want to rewatch or ask for a copy of the slides. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Nicci was actually featured in the Eye of the Pangolin film from Bruce and Toby in the previous session. So we have a bit of a movie star here in this session with us right now. And you're seeing it as a small, tight-knit community of those that are out there fighting for pangolins. And hopefully that community will continue to grow and grow as we're trying to do with this conference. So before I turn it over to Nicci and Leno, just a reminder, this is our last session today. You can watch it on demand, and all of our sessions on demand if you missed any. We're going to have another one tomorrow with another filmmaker, Katie, who's done some amazing work that we're going to see. And then we have our last one, a kind of fun kids session with Ryan, the 9-year-old pangolin ambassador, on Monday. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicci and Leno, and I will be driving the slides from the background. So I'm going to stay here, but off the video and muting myself. Let you guys go, and I'll join you back for the Q&A. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for there we go.
There we go.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Nicci, and thanks for joining Leno and myself on this story of pangolins from when they're poached right through to their rehabilitation, hospital treatment, and their final release. And we're bringing in a character pangolin who we have both dealt with, called Ralphie, as part of our story. So the African Pangolin Working Group and the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet and Humane Society International Africa are 3 organizations which collaborate with one another in pangolin work in South Africa and on the continent, in fact. Next slide. Thanks, James. So pangolins are quiet, secretive, nocturnal mammals who have a territory, and they have their favored burrows, and they know where all their food is, their different ant nests, and they know who their neighbors are, all the animals in their environment, and they know where all the closest males and females are. And they live this quiet life. They've been on the planet for 84 million years. And every evening they come out and they go and eat their ants, and then they potter around, and then they go back to their burrows. And all of a sudden, one day or one evening, all hell breaks loose when they are suddenly picked up and thrown into a sack, and they begin this horrifying, terrifying journey on the illegal trade. They're found in all sorts of horrible conditions and kept in all sorts of different ways. This particular pangolin was brought through to South Africa from Mozambique, which is a neighboring country to us, and she was sealed in the two bottom ends of paint tins or paint buckets in amongst a traditional beer that's made from sorghum. And she was completely covered from head to foot with a sticky fermented substance. And she'd been in that for over a week when she was found on the back of a truck coming into Johannesburg for her final sale. Thanks, James. So they're transported in all sorts of things. This pangolin had been transported, forced into his ball inside a tire and held in place with wire mesh. So the terror that these animals go through, they're looked at and they're poked at and they're picked up and dropped and rolled around and haggled over. There's cigarette smoke and loud music and loud voices as they're discussed and looked at, and prices are discussed, and they're trying to get middleman, and they're trying to get a seller. Trying to get a buyer at the end of the chain. And these animals are terrified. They don't eat. They can't eat because they don't eat in captivity. They can't. They're not given anything to drink, and they can very rarely sleep. So they are highly stressed and under a lot of physical stress. They're sometimes wounded. They've sometimes been hacked at with machetes or pangas, and they have wounds, maybe broken limbs, infections, pneumonia, all kinds of things by the time they are confiscated off the trade. Next slide. So by the time we get them, as I said, they've often been lying in their own excrement for sometimes up to 2 weeks, and are extremely stressed and compromised. So they've gone from this beautiful, peaceful life to this extreme stressful situation, which really impacts on their physical health and makes it really difficult to treat them and get them to a stage where they can be released as healthy pangolins again. Thanks, James. So the African Pangolin Working Group is an NGO or non-profit organization based in South Africa, which works with all the pangolins in Africa and issues that pangolins face in Africa. And we work on several different fronts. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of training with police and the judiciary system, so prosecutors and magistrates. We train department officials on the importance of pangolins, on how to find pangolins in the trade and how to cope with them and deal with them once they have been found. And we also work on the actual retrievals. So we set up sting operations and work hand in hand with law enforcement officers. And just generally do whatever we can to help conserve this incredible species. We were established in 2011, and we're still going strong now, and growing in all sorts of ways. Thanks. Next slide. So this was a sting operation which the Pangolin Working Group was involved in. There were 2 pangolins retrieved of this particular sting operation, which I think had about 12 or 13 law enforcement officers involved as well, because there were 5 people that were arrested on this sting operation. Next slide, please. So there were 5 suspects that were arrested in this sting operation. In South Africa, under our law, which is quite a good conservation law, the suspects can face up to 10 years imprisonment or up to 10 million rands fine, or both. So our best sentence at the moment, our strongest sentence, has been 8 years. We try to go to every single court case, wherever it might be in the country. We give statements to help populate the police dockets. We give testimony in aggravation of sentencing in court and stand as expert witnesses. And it makes a huge difference to the court case itself if we're present just in solidarity with the whole system. And we have in excess of 80 court cases on the roll at the moment. We also have a pangolin canine unit. This dog is Havoc, who is the first pangolin detection dog that's been trained. He works on all 4 African pangolin species. And the unit is managed by Glenn, and the dogs are trained by Annika, who's there in that photograph. And they've been an incredible help to the work that the Pangolin Working Group does. Thanks. Next slide. So the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet is a veterinary hospital and rehabilitation facility which works with all indigenous wildlife and specializes in pangolins. So all the pangolins that are retrieved off the trade in South Africa come through to the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet because we are quite experienced at handling them. And our veterinarian, Dr. Corinne Lawrence, has just completed her master's degree on normal blood values of pangolins, which is an incredible tool which helps us in their treatment. Next slide, please. So we're lucky enough to have access to incredible specialist machinery like this CAT scan, for instance. And part of our protocol, which has evolved over the last couple of years, is that every pangolin, before it's released, undergoes a CAT scan, because it can show up all sorts of things that we might not have noticed or might not have picked up before. It can show us the condition of all the organs and tissues, and it's incredibly thorough and fascinating to see an actual CAT scan of a pangolin's body. Next slide, please. This is Dr. Corinne Lawrence, who has become quite an authority on the Temmincksgram pangolin. Together with myself, we've contributed to the IUCN's Pangolin book, and she's contributed to a whole chapter which has been done by various veterinarians all around the world on pangolins. Here she is listening to a heartbeat of a pangolin. Part of the treatment protocol of all our pangolins is to do a sonar scan on all the females just to determine whether they're pregnant or not. They'll have x-rays if we feel they need one. We do routine blood work on them as well, now that we know what the normal parameters are for pangolins, and the blood work can show up all sorts of indicators as if there's problems going on with various organs, whether their albumin levels are normal or dropping, and that all indicates different things to the veterinarians, and then we can put the right treatment in place. So it's been an incredible tool. These are all incredible tools which help us save pangolins. Next slide, please. So each pangolin comes in with its own set of issues. They're always dehydrated. They're always highly stressed and exhausted because they haven't been allowed to sleep. So they all come in and they're anesthetized. We put them on a drip. We feed them a special, very easy to digest diet. At first, we tube feed them, and then we just let them sleep. And then we start taking them out for walking and feeding, if they're strong enough to be able to do that. And while we're working with each pangolin, we get to know that particular pangolin, and they bond particularly with different people, a specific handler. Some pangolins might like one person and not gel with another person. So it's very interesting to get to know their personalities, and they each do have their own personalities and their own quirks and preferences. And one of those particular personalities is a little pangolin called Ralphie. Next slide, please. This little pangolin was picked up in the middle of a road outside a small town called Hoedspruit, which is up near the Kruger Park in South Africa. He was standing in the middle of the road. I mean, you can see how small he is. He's the size of a ballpoint pen, but he actually weighed 1.5 kilos, which is very, very young. And he was actually picked up by a vet called Dr. Ramph, which is why he was called Ralphie, and taken along to ProVet Veterinary Clinic in Hoedspruit, where he was examined, and they started to they realized that he had concussion and quite a lot of bruising because he was displaying neurological symptoms. So they started treatment for that, and then they called in veterinary nurse who specializes in wildlife. Next slide, please. And this is Natalie Rogers, who took on the immense task of doing the first couple of months of Ralphie's hand rearing. So Natalie has a particular knack with wildlife, and she soon learnt about hand raising pangolins as Ralphie wound her around his little finger, and she became his number one slave. Next slide, please. So this little video, I don't know if you can get this video to work, James. Here we go. So part of Ralphie's time with Natalie was being taken out on little walks, gently coaxed to investigate ant nests and termite mounds and mud and all the natural elements. And here he is trying to pangolin. And he's digging away, little thing. You'll see when she puts her hand down just now how small he really is. And he's trying to coordinate this body and this long tongue and all the ants, which he knows are part of what he must be doing. And he's trying to coordinate all of that as his instincts are dictating to him to do. And then he sort of finishes and he starts to look around for reassurance from Natalie, who's his sort of foster mother, and move towards her. And when Ralphie was finished, or when he got tired as a baby, he would walk up to his person and put his little front paws up and ask for uppy, like a toddler would. And if you didn't pick him up, he would start climbing up your leg. And when he got older, that was quite painful. So here he is just experiencing textures, getting turned on by the scent of the ants and the smell of the ants, and, as I said, coordinating, digging, and feeding. He was also fed a special milk formula, just so that he had all the natural nutrition that he needed, but taken out every day whenever he woke up, really, to go and forage as well. You can see his beautiful scales. They look like shells, and those white tips that are down the center of those scales are indicative of a young pangolin. So here he starts to look up and look for reassurance from his surrogate mother, and she would have picked him up then, and they would have continued their walk. Next slide. So after about 3 or 4 months, Ralphie was transferred through to the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital for his next phase. He was still on his special milk formula, which he would have got at least 4 times a day. He would have been taken out walking and foraging with us as well. Next slide, please. And young pangolins need to eat fairly often. So sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the day and need to go and feed. And in the middle of the day in South Africa, it's quite warm. And so we'd have to shield him with an umbrella while he fed. So, yeah, he basically had a whole team of human slaves pandering to his every need, keeping him cool, keeping him under an umbrella, spritzing him with water to cool him down whenever that was necessary. And as he explored and learned to open termitarium to get to the termites, find ant eggs, and generally learn how to be a pangolin. Next slide, please. So pangolins are, as I said earlier, have personalities, and they all have their own quirks. But generally people wouldn't look at them and think of them as playful. Well, young pangolins, of course, are mammals, and all mammals like to play. It's part of their development. And this is a delightful little clip of Ralphie playing what came to be known as the tickle game. You can start the video, James. Thanks. So you can see him stretching back in anticipation of the tickle on his tummy, grabbing my hand with his tail, rolling around, It was hilarious that day. We laughed so much. It was really, really funny. And it was just so interesting to see how much he enjoyed that play as well, and how important it is for them to interact that way. As young mammals, when we're raising them, whatever the species is, we need to engage with them in this way for their own development and their own fulfillment. And as they get older, of course, we hold them at arm's length so that they can wild up and become who they're supposed to be. But this sort of interaction is very healthy for them, and so interesting for us as from a behavioral point of view. So this is just a sweet little photograph of Ralphie really coming to grips with himself. He has his tongue down the whole of pugnacious ant, which is a type of ant that all the pangolins seem to enjoy. And he's standing on his back feet because, Temminck's ground pangolin are bipedal. They walk on their hind legs, and they're perfectly balanced between their tail and the front end of their body. But their tail is immensely powerful. It's got an incredibly thick muscle. And here he is holding his body steady with the end of his tail positioned like that on the ground. I just love the form that his body has taken there. It's a really nice picture especially of the strength of that tail, or how he's starting to use his body to help him. Thanks. Next slide, please. Just another. People don't realize how agile pangolins are. They climb and they can entwine themselves. And here he is having excavated into a termite mound, which is incredibly hard. You can't really open that very, very easily. Yet pangolins are so strong, and they've got this incredibly strong middle claw on their front feet, which they start opening these mounds with. Ralphie, of course, wasn't strong enough to do that, so we would open the mounds for him. We worked like slaves, I can promise you. But here he is angling himself. He's upside down. His tail is holding on around the corner, and he's getting to the best spot inside that termitaria. Thanks. Next slide, please. It's another example of helping a young pangolin find the cherry on the top, which are the ant eggs. So that rock, you can see the ant eggs on top of that rock. We had overturned the rock to expose the ant eggs, and he was licking them up like crazy. He also cleaned off all the eggs on the top of that rock. So while Ralphie's busy feeding on that site, I would be busy turning over other rocks, looking for ant nests and ant eggs to move him onto. So by the time we'd finished in an afternoon, we felt like we were a troop of baboons turning over all the rocks for this little pangolin. Just another example of his natural behavior. He had excavated, we'd started a hole for him, and he had excavated this termitaria. He had brought out all the loosened earth and fed as he was going. But just an example of his natural behavior, as I said, he would often climb right into those termitaria and have a snooze, and then wake up an hour or so later and continue feeding. And we would just sit around waiting for him to wake up because we loved him. So this video clip is it's just a beautiful view of his scales and how beautifully positioned and formed they are. James, can you just click the video? I don't know if it's starting. There we go. And when it zooms in, you'll see these ants tearing all over Ralphie, but their scales form such an incredible protection for them that they won't be biting him on the back, obviously, but on the underbelly where he has no scales, they might be biting him, but they don't really take much notice of it. So they have no natural predators, pangolins, adult pangolins, that is. So they're often rolled around by lions and leopard and that kind of thing and investigated, but not very often eaten. The younger ones can be taken by some predators, though. So Ralphie's next phase of his journey was about to begin, and we'd identified a beautiful a big 5 reserve down in Zululand called the Phinda Private Game Reserve, and organized that he would go down there and continue what we were doing down in situ at Phinda. So we packed him into his this transport box into the back of my truck, and I drove 5.5 or 6 hours down to Zululand with Ralphie to start him on the next phase of his exciting trip. So basically the same process would continue. Before and after every feed, Ralphie would be weighed so that we could assess how much he'd eaten. And this was influenced by various things, whether we found the right ants for him, whether he was in a good mood, whether the weather was right. All sorts of things influenced how Ralphie fed and how much weight he would put on. But in a good day, in the beginning, I think he would put, Leno, probably about 200 to 300 grams on.
Yeah, at the beginning, somewhere there. Yeah,
that would be a good feed. A nice big adult pangolin can put on up to 800 grams in a night's feed. So it gives you an idea of how many ants they have to eat to sustain themselves. Next slide, please. This is Craig Sholton Douglas, who is the research manager at Phinda, getting to grips with one of his first pangolins. He never knew that in his research career he would be a pangolin dad, but he was a very good pangolin dad. So Ralphie had a team of people who would all take turns in feeding him and taking him out for his foraging sessions on the reserve. Next slide, please. And it was quite exciting. You know, we had released pangolins onto Phinda before. At this stage, there were 2 pangolins on Phinda. There are more now. I think there are about 6 now, aren't there, Leno?
Yeah.
And this was a very exciting conservation project for the African Pangolin Working Group and for Phinda itself, because it was the reintroduction of Temminck's ground pangolin into an area where they were historically extinct. So pangolin had last been seen on Phinda Reserve in, I think it was about the 1940s. And so the local people, the reserve staff had never dealt with pangolin or even seen them. And so it's been an incredible experience to watch everybody's response to them and to be part of the post-release monitoring, which is an intense process to make sure that each pangolin has found its own territory, is coping, is putting on enough weight. So there is quite an intense post-monitoring process that these pangolins go through to ensure that they are settled and that they are thriving. And the Phinda pangolin team have been outstanding in their commitment to these pangolins, and especially to Ralphie's process. So I spent quite a while down there sort of handing over to their staff, and here I was holding Ralphie up to a cocktail ant nest which was further up the tree. And so he would have fed around the base of the tree, and then possibly one of us would have noticed more ants further up the tree, so we just lifted the pangolin up and let him feed that way. Next slide. So pangolins love dung, and they particularly love rhino middens and buffalo dung, basically any fresh herbivore dung. And this was Ralphie discovering one of his first rhino middens. He wasn't rolling in it in this particular one, which they normally do, but he was investigating it. If you could just click the video to start it. Thanks, James.
I love how he's diving in.
He's rootling around. Sometimes there are termites underneath the middens, but I don't think he knew that at this stage. He was just having a good time sniffing and snorting into that rhino dung. So all of these experiences for this young pangolin are extremely important, because they're exposing him to what his life is going to be, and getting him habituated and acclimatized to all the stimulus on this Big 5 reserve. Next slide, please. And here was just another sensorial experience for Ralphie. seeing the mud and smelling all the scents and smells of all the animals that have been there before him. Looking after these pangolins on this reserve and monitoring them, walking with Ralphie in a Big Five reserve, monitoring the pangolins that had been released, which was always done at night when they had emerged from the burrow, is an extremely exciting process or experience, because you could be walking at night behind the pangolin and hear lions roaring or hear something big crashing in the bushes, and you're not quite sure what it is, whether it's a buffalo or a rhino, and it's extremely exciting, as Leno will tell you. So after this initial process of handing over, we engaged the services of Leno Sierra as a full-time Ralphie minder, and she basically watched Ralphie every single day. That was her sole purpose, and she brought him onto the phase where he could be released and monitored as a wild pangolin. So introduce you to Leno and hand over to her.
Cool. Thank you so much, Nicci.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So, so I got Ralphie. I got to start working with pangolins. I've never seen a pangolin before in my life. And it was very random how I got to work with them. But it was an opportunity that, of course, I couldn't say no. I dream of seeing one pangolin once in my life at least. And I ended up having the opportunity to work with them. But, of course, I remember telling Simon, Pinda's director, that I wasn't experienced and I have no much knowledge about this species. And he told me, who does, Leno? Like, honestly, who does? We need someone passionate who wants to learn, who wants to get involved, compromised. And that was like, that's me. So that's how everything started. Ralphie started with me at this stage. Can you please start, James, for this video? This is a time lapse of him feeding very nicely. We did, we still help him in this stage with peaks to open the termite mounds, but inside they're softer for him. So he was showing us that he was already kind of strong enough to dig himself. It's beautiful to watch them dig like this incredibly, pulling soil out to make more space and going deeper and deeper and deeper. And you can just imagine if he's going that deep, how deep the tongue can go. He was fitting incredibly. Next slide, please. So I spent a lot of hours out of the bush. It was getting very cold in those days. So if the sun was too hot, you need to keep him in the shade. If it was too cold, you need to keep him warm. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's Adam, who helped me also for a while with him, holding the pig, that big pig. Believe me, people, you need talent to use it. It's not as easy as it looks. I learned to use it, but it's heavy. It's incredible. Adam became a master on it. So we were opening nests, and then you start learning these things that you shouldn't open the nest too early because then the termites have time to go very deep. So he will spot one, and I was waiting for Ralphie to finish in one nest, and then I will tell him, I'm going there, starting walking, and he will open the next one. Next slide, please. And that's how we were moving him around and around. That was one particular day that I remember calling Nicci from the field and telling Nicci, Ralphie's not eating. He's not eating. He just comes to my legs. It's very cold. And she was like, he must be freezing, Leno. Wrap him in your jacket. So I put him inside my jacket. And he was like not wanting to feed. As you see, I kept telling him, Guy, you need to eat. And he just pulled his head again, like inside the tail every time. And finally, he got warm enough. He ate a little bit. But that day I learned that pangolins have their priorities very clear. You're not going to make a pangolin do what he doesn't want to do. If they prefer to stay in a burrow to save energy because it's too cold or too hot or there's a storm coming that you maybe don't know about, they will know. And even like Ralphie's situation was that we took him out every day. I learned over time now that there's some pangolins that some days they don't come out of their burrows for some particular reason. So that day like teach me a lot of, oh, wow, it's not like taking me out to feed because I think he needs to feed. He knows his things. So that day was very cold. Next slide, please. This is a video. Can you please press play? Sorry. This is Ralphie eating cocktail ants, the same ants that Nicci was holding him on a tree. But we found an area with a lot of them, but they were too high. So we were trying to bring him down the tree, of course, getting covered of cocktail ants. Those ants can bite people. But Ralphie loved them. It was his favorite. So we do whatever we could to find him those ants. They just eat incredibly well on this particular species because, of course, they're also fussy. They don't eat every species of ants and termites. So once you find, look at that incredible tongue I was so impressed at the beginning to see how quick, how fast that tongue can be. It's like a whip. It's amazing. And this ants bite him too. So you see him sometimes like holding like, oh, that hurts, but it's worth it. Like, it's just, he loves them. Next slide. You know that. Next slide, please. As Nicci mentioned when she was explaining the beginning of this, getting the locals involved and more to me, you know, that somehow I ended up being incredibly fortunate to do this job. But I'm Mexican. I'm not South African. And there's so many South Africans that have never seen a pangolin or dream of seeing a pangolin, or they don't even know they exist. So having, for example, Nobo, this guy who was helping me a lot with Ralphie, he got to understand him perfectly. He was the best termite mound opener ever. And it was beautiful to spend time with them and also to see how they got very, very involved as well. Next slide, please. As Nicci said, yeah, we need to cover him from the wind, from the cold. He was always fine. We weren't. We couldn't say the same. But we were trying to keep him feeding, you know. Our goal was to get him on weight in order to release him. So I remember Nicci telling me that I was like an Italian mom, like trying to stop him. But that was the goal. I was so happy. People could keep telling me, you're going to miss him so much. And I was like, dude, maybe I'll miss him, but I can't wait for this guy to be on his own. Next slide, please. As Nicci mentioned as well, it is one of the most incredible experiences I've lived in this process is to be able to see adults totally amazed. Usually as adult, you don't get that mind blown by things that you tears come out of your eyes or giggle uncontrollably. And I've seen that many times with a pangolin. I've experienced so many times to have someone that has never seen a pangolin, and I always say, dude, it takes time in your head. And when that animal shows in front of them, they just like, you cannot speak. It's amazing. I get goosebumps of remembering so many faces of amazement, of beauty, of not understanding, this is so incredible, so odd, so different. So it's beautiful. That's my daughter helping me there. He was also so curious and trying to learn as much as he could about pangolins. Next slide, please. This is Ralphie again, being protected, as Nicci said, by the slaves while I froze in the back of this photo to death. Next slide, please. I love this particular photo. We were waiting. Ralphie sometimes they can spend 2 minutes in a nest, and sometimes they will spend 40. Why? Pangolins only know. You never know which is going to be a good nest. But in this photo, maybe it's too far, but in the background in the center, there's a white rhino mom with a calf. And those guys were around us all that evening. And it's also one of the incredible experiences to be able to work with pangolins in a big 5 game reserve, to be surrounded every day walking in the bush by incredible sightings and interaction. That's also an incredible experience. Yeah. Next slide, please. Well, finally, Ralphie was getting to almost his goal weight. Of course, we were weighing him before feeding, after feeding, weighing his poo every day, collecting his poo if he put in the field, trying to keep as much data close to understand exactly how he was doing. He was doing amazing at that point, just like growing up every single day. I was getting to understand him, of course, much more, getting to read things that at the beginning I had no clue they would do or I could read. And then I got to know him, I think, enough in order for him to be so comfortable feeding every day. If of course I had people with me every day helping me. There were still Craig that you saw in the other photo, and Charlie and Winston and Simon himself. Like, everyone was helping. It's a lot of work with pangolins. Next slide, please. Can you press play here? So he finally, after experimenting dung in that video that Nicci showed you, he finally learned how to do it, and he loved it. The first time I saw him, it was on zebra dung. And you must know that Ralphie was carried back to the vehicle in my shoulder. So, of course, I love the experience of seeing him rolling in dung. And then I remember I'm going to need to carry him back in my shoulder. But it's incredible, that behavior of making sure that the dung gets in between every single scale. It's just amazing. They take like long minutes sometimes, just loving it. I mean, you totally accept the challenge of carrying them with dung because it looks so natural and beautiful behavior that it's incredible to watch. Next slide, please. So at that stage, we were trying to encourage him or to show him water to see if he was going to start mud bathing at some point. He was not doing it. He wasn't interested in drinking water besides from his bottle. So he and the water weren't very good friends. So I did that little dam for him outside Simon's house and tried to encourage him. He ignored me for a long while. I tried it for a few minutes before leaving to feed until we eventually got it. But it was a good experience as well to try to show him and see that he wasn't interested at the beginning. Next photo, please. Then we started the process of weaning him. Of course, reducing the milk amount until he ended up being drinking only water. But we still needed to encourage him to drink water, not from the teat, but from a dish. So that was another step there. But at least in this stage, he was not drinking milk anymore. He wasn't needing that much help opening the nest. His weight was getting close. So we were getting, of course, excited, nervous, but also incredibly pleased that this was happening. Next slide, please. That's also a video. Can you please press play? This is a time lapse as well of him digging, going upside down and using their tail. Their prehensile tail is just incredible how they use it to hold from the sides of the nests. And then, as I told you before, when they pull the soil out and then they do like a dog with the front legs, they push all the soil between the back legs. It's just beautiful to watch when they get engaged with a termite mound. They just go crazy. Sometimes they dig enough to curl inside. Of course, I mean termite mounds are usually regulated the temperature on 32 degrees. So if it was chilly, it was for sure that he was going to try to spend the longer time in there. Next one, please. So our Ralphie, as you can see, was getting incredibly beautiful, strong, heavy, independent, and we were all getting nervous and excited, but totally like we couldn't wait to start literally the soft release process, because he was there help every day, and then we started to be hands off more and more and more. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can see how big he was getting. Next slide, please. This is a video too. This is the day that we finally managed to get him drink water. So this is at Simon's house. Simon, shame. Pangolin's schedule is quite like nocturnal. So of course he was working very early in the mornings. Sometimes I got back to drop Ralphie, who we were keeping him in his house. Can you please press play, James? Oh, sorry. Yes, in this one. So it was a very successful day, but yeah, believe me, we were all tired. It was, at this point, it was a long time. And you should remember, since the first day that Ralphie was rescued, that he was the size of a pen, how many people, hours, and teamwork and effort was involved to get to this stage. Next one, please. Can you press play? So he finally decided to have fun in his personal pool. It was incredible to watch. He did it like for 10 minutes. I've never seen that behavior before. And it was just incredibly exciting to see how he kept pulling more mud inside, like to make the mud thicker. I don't know, like to get it to the point that he liked to. And it's just amazing to watch how much they enjoy this activity, and how much they refresh, and maybe they use it also to parasite control and many other things. But it was incredible the day that he mud bath for the first time. Next one, please. So these were his last days, when we were pretty much pulling him out of the car, put him in the ground, and try just to follow him and monitor exactly how long he spent eating, trying to monitor the species he ate, but try to help them the least possible. Next one, please. He finally started waking up later in the day, and we started to walk with Ralphie at night. So that's when the excitement part began, like walking at night with a pangolin in a big 5-game reserve. So we were getting ready to start following him every day. Those days there were anti-poaching unit helping me every night. Next one, please. We finally got his tags. We use usually on this pangolins 1 telemetry tag and 1 satellite tag. These tags were a little bit big to Ralphie. We thought it were going to be too big, but of course we got advice from the professional that the weight was perfect for his body weight. So we put those tags in him. We were going to wait 1 or 2 more days, checking how he deal with them. Next one, please. Can you press play? So this is the first day that we walked him wearing his tags. And we were incredibly proud because he was like an astronaut with his suit. You know, it looked so ready to go. Like, it was incredible to watch him with tags. Next one, please. We were, of course, making sure that all our devices were perfectly. I must say, we were nervous and scared, and we didn't know what was going to happen. So we were just like making sure everything with control was set up. I'm sure, Nick, you weren't even there. I'm sure for you was also like, no, let him go.
It was
next. Yeah.
I was going to say, it was absolutely nerve-wracking. I mean, you think all of us, I mean, Prof. Ray Janssen from the African Pangolin Working Group, myself, everybody at the Joburg Wildlife Vet, we were on tenterhooks waiting for news every minute of what was happening with him. Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, next one. So this is his weight the night we were going to release him. You must remember he got to Nicci weighing 1 kilo and 700 grams or 500 grams?
1.5.
1.5. And we got this big boy to get to 7 kilos, 180 grams. That's, of course, a nocturnal photo because we were going to release him that night. Next one, please. Can you press play? So this is how the next week went. We walked him for an entire week wearing his tags, not helping him at all, just to make sure he will gain weight on his own, not touching him during the night, in the dark, in the beautiful sicklebush thickets, which is thorny bushes that you don't know. It's just a perfect area for black rhinos. They also love drainage lines. They started to take us to the dodgiest places in the reserve, and there we go, walking behind a pangolin, just following them. Next one, please. He eventually, one of those nights, found a burrow. And that night we decided it was the night that we should let him sleep outside. We drove back, broke into the camp. I couldn't believe we were going to abandon him in the middle of the reserve. And in the other hand, I was like, oh my God, the nightmare is going to be over for him. He's going to say like, finally, I'm sleeping in a burrow. I'm going to hear the crickets and the hyenas, and it's going to be fine. So this is the next morning that we found him. Next one, please. This is us waiting for him to wake up and walk out of his burrow, because, of course, we were just now going to watch. Let him do whatever. So we spent like 2 hours there, like drinking coffee, eating crackers, waiting for him. Next one, please. And this is when we started tracking him. Can you press play, please, James? Only at night to go wait him. So that, and in this stage, we were going out every night to find him, wait him, check his body condition, and let him go. It was a 3-minute visit. And all the rest, it was on his own. And we were impressed how incredibly Ralphie was doing. Of course, the first day he didn't pick up as he was picking up with the Italian mom, but his condition was still incredibly good. And he managed to keep eating. You can press play in this one too, James. Thank you. And this is when you realize that's a free pangolin on his own, feeding. He has a place to sleep. He knows how to deal with whatever he needs to deal. We saw, of course, elephants in the area or buffalo dung the next morning. We were like, oh my God, how is he dealing with these things? And well, he's dealing as he knows how to do it. Next one, please. And then, well, the thing is that everything starts all over and over again. Sadly, pangolins need to be poached for this chain of events to happen. But the incredible thing is that at least they're being able to be rescued alive, to be rehabilitated by the incredible team on the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital, and then to send to different reserves. Next one, please. In this case, we got ready another team now in Manyoni, where we got pangolins as well, and everyone was very excited. And even if we warned them, because now we knew how much work it was, they couldn't imagine. They didn't even know what it was going to be. I can tell you, it's totally worth it. Next slide, please. So after having pangolins again, you realize that having pangolins here, it's an incredible feeling, but it's also veterinary services and critical situations. Next one, please. Blood samples, x-rays in the middle of the night. Next one, please. And then a beautiful collage to show you what a beautiful nightmare is to work with pangolins. It's the most incredible, beautiful, and terrible thing you're going to ever experience is working your off like for days and days, not getting days off, going at night, changing tags, staying awake till 2 a.m, getting a notification on your phone at 2:30 a.m. One of your pangolins is in the fence, waking up people, getting firearms, walking around, getting samples, getting your phone with thousands of millions of photos of weights or maps and coordinates and numbers and Excels and asking people to help you, and night encounters with Big Five and digging termite mounds and getting ticks and flipping rocks and tube feedings and time changes and torches, telemetry, and many more. But all of this, it's totally worth it when you experience something like, next slide, please. Can you please press play? A day like this, a day that you open a box for the last time for one of those pangolins and you just see them walking into their freedom. Back, nightmare's over. And they just go back there and they do amazing. Next one, please. That was it. So that's pretty much what we live since the beginning of the process until these animals are actually now tonight, maybe active, even now when we're talking.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a great narration. Well, so if folks, let me look through the questions because I was running the slides, of course, so I couldn't monitor the questions. You guys might have seen some come in. So here's, I'm just looking at a couple here. What age was that pangolin released at? Do you guys know?
It must have been, I remember when I arrived, they thought it was around 10 months. So maybe he was released when he was a year and a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think just over a year, safe to say. Yeah. Yeah.
And those tracking devices, pretty large. They stay on that pangolin all through its experience in the wild, so you continue to track it and keep it safe. Or I imagine they wrestle it off at some point.
Sometimes they do. Yeah, pangolins. We've had pangolins losing their telemetry. Wrenching them off on rocks, and they're bolted. A hole is drilled through the scale, and the telemetry is actually bolted on either side of the scale. So it can move, but it's pretty securely bolted on. So we've had them come off before, but to gather all the data and the information about how well the pangolin's doing and where it's moving and what its territory is that it's forming post-release, it's so essential to have those tags on. And as Lena was saying, we haven't noticed any pangolins having a problem with them. So all pretty carefully managed and watched.
Yeah, it's incredibly how good they deal with the tags. Yeah. Of course, we're still learning, and the developers of these tags are also trying to change small things in the design, because at the beginning we were losing the aerials, and then they add like two little like fins to protect the aerial so we don't lose it. And we're all learning together, because of course there's not such a, can I get a pangolin tracker please? So we're just trying to make the best out of it. Learning, they lose it sometimes. We're trying to use a little bit of this like a glue when we screw them now to try to hold them for longer, but it didn't 100% make a difference. So we're still learning, but it's incredibly important to have those in our pangolins.
I was curious about the video of the play, Nicci, you showed, because pangolins, correct me if I'm wrong, live pretty solitary lives.
They do.
And so is that play behavior with another mammal, in this case you, new to a pangolin if they're not typically doing that in the wild? And if they, like, who are they playing with, so to speak, in that way in the wild, if they're living solitary?
Well, we don't know who they're playing with, because we don't know, that aspect of pangolin behavior yet. But I imagine, they would be playing. I've seen Ralphie just playing with himself, twining around tussocks of grass and wrestling with it and pulling it with his tail and kicking it. And I've seen him and other young pangolins hold rocks and roll around with rocks and put them on their bellies and sort of flick them off with their tails and pick them up again. And just these sort of wrestling games. So I think it was just an extension of that kind of natural behavior that he would have had as a solitary little pup with his mum.
Adam asked, has the lockdown affected your ability to run sting operations, rescue and release pangolins? Has it impacted your operations at all yet?
Not really, no. There has been a change, but it hasn't affected it, no.
Got it. How many pangolins from Nicole come through the Johannesburg Wildlife Vet per month or per year on average?
Well, it depends. At some stage we are treating a lot. They're all, none of them are kept on site, by the way. They're treated at the hospital, but they're not kept there for obvious security reasons. So there are some information which we just can't really share. But yeah, it's a fair number that have come through the hospital.
Kathy asked, have you tried experimenting with any artificial diets? She mentioned there's a product that seems to maybe just come out in Australia. Yeah. But are there any artificial diets that have proved effective with pangolin rehab or no?
Yeah, Kathy, hi, thanks for the question. The Temminck's ground pangolin, I don't know whereabouts you are, but the Temminck's ground pangolin doesn't feed in captivity, which is why we have to take them out walking so that they can feed themselves. We do, when they're very compromised, we do tube feed them, and we have found a diet or devised a diet that seems to work for them, which has been trial and error, again, working out which is the best artificial diet to tube feed the compromised pangolins. But otherwise, you can't put a bowl of anything in front of them. They won't eat it. Challenging animals to work with.
Yeah, very picky eaters. Yeah. A few questions this week around just wondering pangolins' gestation period, how often they reproduce. I know the data is still being sort of gathered by all conservationists around this, but what can you guys say about anything you know about their reproduction cycles?
We don't know much about them at all. We think, we guesstimate that it's about 4 months, but also it hasn't been described. We haven't studied it in depth yet. There's just been so much else to look at. It's one of the aspects that needs to be looked at soon.
Yeah, also I've found a few things that I've read, and you find different data. And of course, sometimes you find pangolins gestation period is, but are we talking about giant pangolins or white-bellied pangolins or Sunda pangolins? So sometimes the information is not really clear to know exactly. So in particular with Temminck's ground pangolins, that is the species that we work with, there's no concrete, gestation period.
Running out just about a minute ago, I want to revisit real quick a topic the three of us discussed last week, because I think it's relevant and hasn't really been surfaced a lot this week. It was touched on briefly in Bruce's and Toby's movie, but it's sort of the working theory on the role pangolins play in their ecosystem. And of course, we don't have enough data on this, right, to definitively say anything, as we do maybe some other keystone species, elephants, orcas, animals like that. We have a lot more data on. But I think it's important. You both had some thoughts to share around theories of the roles they may be playing that still need to be validated with more data. But I think it's important to kind of share your perspective on that, just because it's a topic that hasn't been touched on too much this week, but I think is important for people to understand.
Leno, off you go.
Okay. I think, this is my own theory, but of course, I think if we would have enough data or time enough to measure, for example, the areas that our pangolins are settling, their territories here in these reserves that they were locally extinct in Zululand. If we have the opportunity to measure what's going to happen with that piece of land, I'm sure there's going to be a big impact in all the soil. The the damage, let's say, they do in a termite mound, and the speed with that the termites need to fix that termite mound, and the amount of soil that they need to pull from the underground to rebuild it, and all of these activities underground, I'm sure they will change everything, like literally from the ground, from the soil. So I think maybe we cannot prove exactly what his role is, but I'm sure same as aardvark and armadillos and bears in America and everything that works with the underground, it has a big role.
Yeah, it makes sense. Nicci, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it's all very interesting. It's obviously something that hasn't been studied and hasn't been defined yet. They must have some sort of role. They've been on the planet for 64 million years. They must have some place that they fulfill. They have to have, but I don't know what it is.
Well, thank you both for making this happen, and especially late at night in South Africa. Thank you for all the work you do. I think it's people like yourself that we're also inspired by, and support in any way we can. Any last words for Ralphie or pangolins like him? You wanna share? Do we know where Ralphie is today?
Yeah, we know exactly where Ralphie is. The last photo we saw from Ralphie is like 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
So he's still very closely monitored. Of course, not as at the beginning. He may be checked every 2 weeks or so, just to check. Every day they know where he is with the satellite tag, and every 2 weeks they go find him, or 3 weeks, to check his weight, if he's moving normally in his territory. But he's doing incredibly since then.
Awesome. Well, we're going to sign off. For everybody, you can ask Nicci and Leno more questions in the app. We'll also share their contact info and the organizations they work with, and you can encourage you to support them. As always, please, if you can, donate to Save Pangolins. The donation link we've been sending around every day. We're making this conference freely available in hopes that we can raise some funds for pangolins. There'll also be the trivia on Animalia right after this later today, where you can win some free pangolin swag. And then don't forget, tomorrow at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, we have Katie Schuler presenting some of her amazing film work that she's shot and made about pangolins. And again, that's tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And then our last session in the afternoon on Monday for kids with the youngest pangolin ambassador we've been able to find in Ryan Hill. Thank you again, Nicci and Leno. Have a good evening. Get some sleep. Get some rest.
Thanks so much for the amazing conference. It's been wonderful to get all the pangolin people together and to see all the support. It's been really amazing. It really helps us feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also to Leif, Alessio, Carla, Nancy, Samantha, Selene, and Leon. My parents are both here. Nicole, Kathy, everyone who joined to make questions. We're going to try to answer them all. Tara, Paul, Mark, everyone, thank you so much for hearing us. I think that the changes need to be made by all of us. It's not maybe me that it's hands-on. We all can do a little part of this big change. So thank you so much for getting interested in this conference.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.